Today we're going to talk a little bit about bureaucracy and what that means, why it's actually important, and then open it up at the end for QA. I've asked for the taping to stop at QA so we can have an honest discussion off the record. Thank you to Rob Nelson for that idea. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ashley Hathaway. I have a background in art, design, and front-end development. I've worked in a variety of roles over the years and spent the majority of my career as a freelance developer and designer in all sorts of companies. So that was really great because it showed me a lot of different processes and cultures very quickly. And I started to pick up on what works and what doesn't. So every 6 months I'd get to see something new. And I've definitely seen what it's like at startups, enterprise, corporations, and everything in between. I'm now a product manager at the Watson Developer Cloud. We deal with big data, NLP, AI, and machine learning APIs. It's awesome. And I've been there almost 2 years. I really enjoy what I do and the people I work with. I found some things that IBM does a little bit differently, actually, and I wanted to share some of the things that really work. So I'll start with a little story. Story of 2 companies. So this is a startup. Look, it's so cute. Most companies start out like this, right? There's a few people working on strategy as well as operations. You're wearing many hats. The company starts to grow. There might be a few folks starting to work on just one primary function, but most people tend to cover a few domains. There's little extraneous work because there's so many bases to cover. People are generally more aligned because they communicate more and might sit right next to each other. It's also super exciting and super risky. So as companies succeed, they find they can't keep up with demand and they start adding resources and the company gets bigger. Eventually, you get to something like this. And as product portfolios change and locations are added, there are more needs to manage, process, people, tools, divisions form. There are now layers of management. Multiple locations spring up across multiple time zones. So here's the thing. Sometimes you get this. It's Brazil. It's kind of fantastic in its own way, but definitely not something you want to live in. And then sometimes you get this. It's Tesla. It's awesome. It's freaking robots making titanium engines. You're a 12,000 person corporation, but you're still changing the world. So what the heck? What gives? Why do we see such extremes? So why do we describe some large corporations as bureaucratic and others as innovative? And why do we find bureaucracy at even small companies? Clearly, scale doesn't really have much to do with it. So I started thinking about the word bureaucracy, and what does it mean exactly? Well, in one way, it's sort of this blanket term that we use to describe this vision of a monolithic, weighty, redundant, old, stodgy company. You know what I mean. It's red tape, it's office politics, it's a system which the process of following rigid or complex procedures impedes effective action. It's Dilbert, it's Brazil. Alternatively, bureaucracy could mean checks and balances. It could mean varying skill sets and expertise working together to ensure success in a strategy. One could argue that decisions made slowly but accurately are far better than decisions made with limited information made in haste. Bureaucracy means roles, expectations, and process are clearly defined, allowing people to focus on their goals at work. When companies group roles by function, they are able to maximize resources and lower cost. Through the lens of DevOps, it's actually quite clear that DevOps plays a large part in organizational efficiency and anti-bureaucratic processes. The characteristics we find in DevOps culture, like quicker communication and feedback, responsibility and autonomy to build the right thing, ship the right thing, and do so supported with a team, actually help production and increase revenue. That's definitely not bureaucracy. Thinking about that made me realize it was really just about economies of scale. So, if you're not familiar with economies of scale, the concept dictates that as production of goods and services increase, the cost of producing these goods must decrease. Simple concept, fixed cost over a large number of units lowers the cost per unit. So on the left, companies are able to buy in bulk, manage better deals, buy specialized equipment, and hire specialized skill sets. It's not just about materials or fixed costs, it gets to the culture too. There's a high level of order, efficiency, and process. Individuals have access to more shared resources and are able to focus on one task instead of being pulled into many. Operating efficiencies are actually compounded in economies of scale. It's a well-oiled machine, which actually, come to think of it, sounds pretty bureaucratic. So now the flip side, diseconomies of scale. When this happens, cost of producing goods actually increases, and we start to see some of those pesky and frustrating experiences pop up. You can see that cost is going up and output is going up. You're creating extra stuff and it's expensive. There's layers of management that impede action. Nobody likes this. It's not fun, it's bad for business. Oh wait, that sounds like bureaucracy too. So it became clear that bureaucracy is not a black and white issue. And as with most things, it's a gray area. It doesn't really matter what you want to call it, because there's really no use in arguing semantics or getting into lofty economic discussions. That actually really doesn't solve anything. It just gives you a richer vocabulary to describe the movie Office Space. So I'd rather spend our time today focusing on solutions, because the only thing that matters is shipping good products. So this is a wall in the IBM Design Studio in Austin, Texas, where I work. And it might not look like something you'd find in a 430,000 plus company that's over 100 years old. But from all the places I've worked, large and small, I've found, for me, the only thing that matters is shipping good stuff with good people. This is what matters. If it works for you and your team, then it works. It doesn't matter what you call it, if you use Slack or Agile. There's no silver bullet for innovation, productivity, efficiency, or happiness. It doesn't matter the size of your organization or the size of your team. It doesn't matter if your office has a ping pong table or a kegerator. At the end of the day, it's about making meaningful products with the people you work with. So to ask a better question, how can a company with outdated processes or tools begin to reinvent themselves? How can large corporations remain innovative? How do we get to this? And at IBM Design, we work a lot with design thinking. And one of the techniques in design thinking is this idea of diverge and converge. Divergence is all about pulling things apart. It's breaking things into smaller bits, adding lots of different ideas from different sources or experiences on a similar theme. Diverge is about coming up with tons of ideas super fast, wrong or right, realistic or impossible. During Diverge, you get lots of different people coming at something from a different perspective. Convergence, alternatively, is about coming together to realize the best of those ideas. It's making choices and adding details. There are lots of ways to diverge and converge. One way is to get your team together and focus in on a certain problem, persona, or pain point. So this is an example of an empathy map and then a journey map, which I'll go into in a second. During divergence, ideas are generated quickly, loosely. Implementation is not considered at all. Only ideas. Broad strokes are not something I found most engineers are comfortable or fond of. So this exercise can be kind of difficult to play in the realm of hypotheticals. During convergence, though, thinking through these ideas and implementations can be discussed. You're able to more thoroughly consider scenarios because you have the expertise of all sorts of skills together. You'll find that patterns and priorities emerge. Another way I think about diverge and converge is a little different and doesn't necessarily need everyone together at once. It takes a little more legwork, but as a product manager, I can apply this to any situation. You still get themes and patterns at the end, and that's really what matters. So here's an illustration of a user holding a phone who clearly needs version control. So to start with kind of the diverge, converge concept, we meet with individual stakeholders, users, and clients one-on-one. We assess their needs, goals, pain points, and priorities. We interview them, learn about their work, role in the org, and empathize with the situation. Once everyone has been interviewed and all data is collected, we converge to find the common themes. And then from these themes or buckets, we give them a name and then prioritize them. It's important to keep things about the user. You can easily get into feature-driven work right here. Remember, it's about the people actually using the product, not the people that assume that they know about the people using the product. It's also important to keep things sizable. You don't want to promise to deliver the moon here. So now this is the step that I think most people miss, and that's playing back to stakeholders. So you present your results to your stakeholders or show your findings to them to make sure you understand them correctly. See if you're identifying their needs. What's nice about this is that when you play back or present, they get really excited. They can see that you're going to help with their problem and that you're interested in their work. It's super encouraging to know that what you're coming up with is going to directly help someone. You might need to change a few things or tweak priorities a little bit, but essentially you're coming up with a vision. And then execute. You do the thing, you ship the thing, and then make sure to measure the thing. Rinse and repeat, this time with more context, trust, and experience. What's great is that you can apply this process to OKRs, Agile, in IBM design we call it hills, anywhere you want to get lots of perspectives or have a situation where you've got stakeholder buy-in, Diverge and Converge can help. So in DevOps, I could see this helping to ensure people are building the right thing and doing so with the support and understood vision of a team. So this idea of convergence and divergence in design thinking comes from Tim Brown at IDEO. IBM Design has taken some of these ideas and applied it at scale. One of the coolest things in my mind to come out of this is Design Camp. At IBM Design, there's 3 different design camps. So there's a 1-day design camp for executives, a 1-week design camp for product teams, and then a design camp for new hires coming out of college. Design camp for product teams is all about multidisciplinary teams working on a product, coming together to prioritize, align, and develop plans of execution using design thinking methods. So this means that engineers are next to designers, are next to product managers, and whoever else is involved as a key stakeholder in building your product. Laptops are shunned, email is put on hold, you're forced to socialize and move around and talk and write. There's free food. It's terrible. One of my favorite experiences with Design Camp was during this giant summit. We had probably 150 people in a room, all broken up into teams of 6 to 10, working on the same problem. And there were literally thousands of Post-its. During the exercise, I was walking around and helping answer questions or reminding people that you weren't supposed to talk during ideation, to instead write your ideas down and then post it on the wall, which was pretty sweet when I got to tell a hotshot VP that they should be quiet. I mean, I did it nicely, but it was pretty cool. I made my way over to a table of engineers, and one of them looks up at me and says, "I've never done anything like this in my entire life. I'm having so much fun." That was huge. That totally broke this so-called giant bureaucracy. It got things back to where they should be, about creating products that matter for people that matter. It's not just blindly building and shipping stuff because. And that's what it's all about. Even though we're working on enterprise-level software, we still make things about the end user. Stakeholders and clients matter, but it's the end user that's most important. In my experience, this is sort of the great equalizer. You're just working together as a team at that point and rallying around a user need or problem. It's about empathizing and developing solutions everyone can get behind. It's about coming up with ideas and getting out of the "we can't because" mindset. It's not about politics or titles. There's something about holding brightly colored Post-its that really bring people down to earth. It's the same reason I had a college professor require everyone to wear ridiculous hats during critiques. It's because you can't take yourself too seriously and you can't be too much of a jerk when you're wearing a giant sombrero. So one of the tools that we use is called an empathy map. And it's a pretty common UX artifact and really great to start to develop user personas. It's quick, it's easy, does a good job of starting to get people thinking about things through the senses of the user. So to start, you draw a face for your user in the center, and you give them a name and pretend that they're real. And then map out what the user thinks, sees, says, does, feels, and hears during the experience. And then at the bottom, list pains and gains. So everyone contributes to this, puts up a bunch of stickies for about 5 minutes. And then a few examples of what they look like in action. So now throughout the life cycle of the product, you come back to this as a touchstone. And the great thing about user-centered decision-making is that now every single action, project, priority, feature, minutes spent can be tied back to what is important for this particular user. I'll mention that there can be multiple users, of course, in which case you'd have more than one empathy map. The second exercise I want to call out that is particularly helpful is kind of taking an empathy map and then adding time elements to it. So this is a journey map or experience map and is another great and common UX artifact. In this one, you take your user and then map out a journey for a particular use case. Along the x-axis, noting thoughts, actions, and feelings. On the y-axis, you can start to incorporate metrics like happiness, frustration, or satisfaction. Like when Sally, our hypothetical user, checks email in the afternoon, she gets super bummed out, but she loves it when she gets to inbox 0. So you're kind of combining the empathy map with a timeline and then particular events that spur a feeling. I wanted to share that you don't have to be co-located to do this. Obviously, having everyone together in the same room is the best case scenario. But this is an example of a project a team did on MuralE, which is a great tool that teams can use online when you're actually just like posting stickets on or post-its online. It works pretty well and it's pretty fun. So another great thing that comes out of these design camp sessions is a discussion about priorities, resources, and timelines. You walk away with a vision that's realistic. There's, of course, disagreements and conflicts, but you can get around a common goal. Everyone is able to voice their opinion and knowledge, so you can work together as a team to create solutions that work for you. One of the most common problems is dealing with lack of resources, time, or budgets. Coming from a design background, I view constraints and limitations as a good thing. That's where you get creative. The worst problems are the ones where you can go anywhere. When you're able to come up with something new, something that fits, or try something inventive and different, that's what it's all about. It's about seeing how far you and your team can go with limited time and budget. Adam Cutler of IBM Design talks about designing with soul and to embrace constraints and limitations. In fact, come to think of it, in my experience, that's the only thing that's common about every single scenario, constraints and limitations. You will never have everything. It will never be ready or perfect or done, no matter how big your org or how many people work on a product. And in that way, knowing that imperfections are just part of the process takes some of the strain off. I found, too, that design camp is kind of like a conference sometimes. You get back to your day-to-day all pumped and jazzed and inspired and, yeah, we're totally going to take over the world. It's going to be great and easy and perfect. And then you hit a wall because there's still work to be done. So then what? Basically, if you walk away from my talk with one thing, it's that if it's good for the user, it's good for business. If it's good for the business, you're going to have an easier case of making your case. Make it about the user. Use metrics and, if you can, revenue to tell your story. Don't forget to make it a story. So this flowchart is user-centered decision-making in a nutshell. Now you can run every single VP request, every late-night crazy reactionary request, and anything you're working on through this. Need justification? Well, if it works well for the users or clients, it's way easier to justify it. If it doesn't impact the user or ship a great product, then maybe that's evidence of why you shouldn't be doing it. As a product manager, I take this one step further and ask, how beneficial is this to the user? And then take that into consideration. So this is a way more ridiculous flowchart because sometimes there's I don't knows or maybes or I'm not sure, and that's totally okay, but the point is to question what you're doing and then understand why it's important. So it's a little wonky, but basically it gets to developing empathy. Working with a user researcher or UX design team can help cut out unnecessary builds. The most fun part of all of this, though, is that your users change, your user needs change, expectations, mental models, they all change, and staying empathetic to that is super important. So one of the reasons I'm here at PuppetConf actually is to stay engaged with healthy, happy developer communities like this one. So I come here to steal stories and develop empathy and then use my experience to go back and make better products. It's a little enlightened self-interest. What I think everyone in software forgets too is that DevOps teams are kind of the last bastion before the user touches the software. Like there may be a QA team involved, maybe, but y'all are closest to the user. I think that's pretty important to emphasize. What y'all do has a direct impact on someone's life. That's pretty awesome. And while we're on our flowchart kick, I wanted to address the most common scenario when thinking about bureaucracy, which is the process gauntlet. So say you want to do a task. You want to move information from point A to point B. It's easy, right? But as we all know, it looks a little more like this sometimes. And this is excessive rules and formalities that obscure the intent or retract from the information being delivered. The effort it takes to change, improve, or communicate something outweighs the value of that information. It sucks energy, time, and defies logical process. Oftentimes when playing this game, I feel a little like Andy in Shawshank Redemption. I'm just crawling through crap, trying to find the person that can help, or the button that does the thing, or this or that or the other. We've all been there. Sometimes no amount of design thinking or stickies can get you out of this one. So in situations like this, I try to focus on what I'm actually trying to accomplish. What is the purpose of me doing this thing? What is the end point, and why is it important? Who cares about it except for me? Am I just trying to submit an expense report? Am I documenting something? Who would care if I didn't go through the chutes and ladders? Once I have that, I can show in some cases that following a process exactly by the book doesn't actually accomplish what I need. I'll show that it brings me to some other spot. I'll use the weighty software or process by the book, and then I'll track everything. I'll show the weighty process doesn't accomplish the goal that's important to the business. But, oh hey, what's that over there? The other tool that does exactly what I need. I'm going to use that one now. And then I'll show that this other way gets me to where I need to go in half the time, for half the cost, with more impact, and now I can focus on things that actually matter. I try to make the case so clear, because you've measured everything along the way, that not doing this would be bad for the business. It keeps me from shipping the good things that users love and create revenue. Alternatively, I've seen the just do it anyway and ask forgiveness later tactic used to varying levels of success. So I'm not here to say design thinking will solve the world's problems or that it's the only thing that works. I think it's important for teams to remember that whatever works for them is right. It doesn't matter if it's design thinking or OKRs or all of them or none of them. That's because making stuff is really hard, and using your brain is really hard. Getting a bunch of people who work fast to sync and communicate and consider a multitude of ever-changing variables is really hard. Even though I work in a large team that's all over the world, I feel like it's a startup because there's the agony and ecstasy of a startup. The wins are not always big. The fails can be pretty painful. Gaining alignment and swimming in a sea of ambiguity takes a lot of energy. Changing cultures is not easy. Asking people to use their brains in ways they've never done so and think about big, sticky problems is messy and not easy. But for me, and maybe for you too, it doesn't have to be about easy. Innovation isn't about easy. Moments like this make it all worthwhile. Finding the people that you connect with is what makes things meaningful. Being able to find some sort of ownership in a project and watch your ideas see the light of day is awesome. And with that, thank you.